So in our previous video, we have been building enough of an app that looks more or less like a dial. If we do something, if we run it, it would look something like this. Where did it go? Right here. Right, so it has a label, a separator, a text field, a separator, and a grid layout with 12 buttons that more or less represent a phone number. So if we look at this file, I think we can all agree on how ugly it looks, and mostly because you have a single file doing a lot of different things, and it's not really clear who's doing what and what is doing who. So in this next part, we are going to discuss of a computer paradigm called model view controller. Okay, so one of the things that this model view controller paradigm helps us is to do a little bit of a division of powers, if you will. So in every graphical user application, you will have something that will be in charge of drawing and any presentation, shadows, positioning, layout, etc. Part that is going to be in charge of representing the data that we want to represent. And the last item is a part that is going to connect how things are going to be drawn according to the current state of the data. And that we are going to call the controller. And that we are going to, in this case, call it the coordinator. And I'm using different terms than model view controller just so that it's absolutely clear what each one of these guys do. Because then I'm going to then relabel them as model view controller. So that way it is, let's choose a yellow here. So we're going to then label them properly. Okay, all right, so the thing that is in charge of drawing is basically the view side of it. The charge that is in charge of the data, it's called the model. And the part that is in charge of coordinating or linking all the three is called a controller. So MVC stands for model view controller. MVC, model view controller. In the case of this little application, we are going to try to reverse engineer what we should have done early on in the process, because a good programming process would actually have an architectural session where you would ideally plan what exactly this app is going to do and how everything is going to be where. In this case, we're going to break down this app to put it into three different files. One that is going to be the model, the other one that is going to be the view, and the other one that is going to be the controller. So one of the things that I would like to do for this class is to rename this into well, let's create a new package. New package. We're going to call it phone display. In that package, we're going to then create three new classes: phone model, phone view, and phone controller. And obviously I would like to have also a new phone application. This one extends application, and we're going to do public static void main string args, and we're going then to if we alt enter, class, then we do the same thing. This is where we start then going to copy some stuff, but before that I'm going to exit the presentation mode because I want to go into a little bit of a different view. What I would like to do is to open up this file and this file, and I want them to show them as split horizontally, no, vertically, because I want to be able to go into this window and then start copying some stuff from one side to the other. So it's going to be quite useful for me to then switch from what we had into this thing. Okay, all right, so this is where we start copying, moving some stuff around, because if we go into our phone application, well, let's go into our phone view here. We're going to be able to then display it properly. So how do I break down all these presentation stuff into what kind of controller it has to be? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to return the main flow pane, extends flow pane, and now that I have this flow pane, I can then say something like public phone. Actually, we don't even need to. Well, void build. And then I'm calling this as a build method, just as a way of like essentially copying and pasting everything that I am going to get from the thing. And every time that I do a root, because I am replacing this root for this guy, I am going to change it into self. Again, I am making my view the flow pane. Now, just full disclosure, there's 1,000 ways of doing this. I am just putting these things as they come to my mind, and I try to solve the problem. But that doesn't mean that this is like the only way or the way, but it's just a way of solving the problem, nothing else. So because we are creating this flow pane, we can do then this, 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 this. Essentially, we renamed everything that was as root. And then we also have the draw dial, which we can also then essentially move around. Right? So we have created that. And also I want to move the text display. So at this point you probably are thinking, well, you essentially just moved the entire app. In this case, mostly yes, because everything that was, we were only really drawing things, but we are going to then separate most of these behavior for handling the phone, and even probably holding and even just changing the display in a little bit. We want to change the logic so that everything is clearly separated. So, okay, we have moved all these things, and let's just move this thing. Where's the draw flow thing? Flow. We're going to, whenever we do build, we're gonna just throw it there. Okay, so do a constructor just to be able to override this constructor. So we're gonna do public view, public phone view, and then we're gonna do, what is this? What is this value? Orientation. And then we're going to then do super and we're gonna import this guy, and thus far we have moved pretty much everything. So in here, which in reality we shouldn't have been changing the phone, the hello world, because we're gonna just move all these stuff around, but it's okay. We're going to just do phone view root equals new phone view, and since we essentially are inheriting from our other package, then it's going to be okay. And then let's just copy all these guys into our phone application from here into the start thing. So we've essentially broken down the application into the view, and what we now need to do is just to focus on setting up the controller and even a model, a simple model where we can just separate things so that the view is only in charge of drawing, the controller is in charge of connecting that and the data is in charge of just storing things. How do we remove every reference that it's auto updating itself and any logic that is going to do it, so that this is just limited to drawing and not really doing anything else? One of the things that one of the concepts that we've discussed in the past is something like called delegation, and we can use a little bit of that, but the main thing is that we can in some more complex applications, you want to do like per each view a controller, per each controller a model, or for each data type a model. And in the model, what we should do is we should do private string phone, and then public phone model, and we can just then pass string phone. And what we should do, maybe what we should do is so that we can have data that it's like public string get phone, we can do something, a getter and a setter, and this goes back to Java 1, just making sure that we have encapsulation to first of all validate the phone if we want to create it, or if we want to format the phone properly, so that way as we're putting numbers it can be adding some of the dashes that go in between. So string get phone, let's do return this dot phone, and then public void set phone, and then string phone. And what we can do here is just maybe we're gonna validate that this is a phone, and we can do a to do and mark it in IntelliJ. And actually let's just give it a little bit more room right now. In IntelliJ you can use something like this to do, and it will keep track of where you have to do. So if you go into your tool windows and you go into the to do navigator, you can actually go into, doesn't matter how many files you have, you can always go into this guy directly because you left that to do note. It's really useful, especially it's inside of the comments to do, and then just this syntax actually helps you to keep track of them. Phone equals phone, and this is like a very basic model. Has numbers and dashes only. There's more complex strings like for phone numbers, like plus or pound signs or things like that, but right now we're just going to leave it for simplicity as numbers and dashes only. And then in the application we can say something like the purpose of this exercise is to highlight the separation. So in this case we're going to do something like public let's say stage, and then yes, it's a JavaFX stage. Yes, JavaFX stage. View, and then public build view. Then we pass the stage that we got from the application, and then we do this dot view equals stage, and then let's move a lot of these things from this guy, because we're going to pass it into controller. We're going to do phone controller c equals new phone controller, and then we can do c dot build view primary stage. And in the phone controller, because the controller is the thing that is controlling everything in the actual view, is controlling the interactions between the view and the model. So we're just making the application as dumb as possible by having the phone controller and then essentially passing everything to this. So then in the view we need to maybe so that we can remove, let's do like the traditional Java formatting, so we can remove this part. We should add a delegate, and then we can do public class. We're going to create an interface, and then we're going to call it phone view delegate, and then we're going to do public phone controller, and then no, actually in this delegate we are going then to just void handle event we're going to handle an event, and then public void, well, for now let's just make it so that we're gonna in the view we're gonna have a phone controller or phone view delegate, and in the controller we're gonna implement the phone view delegate. This might not make much sense right now, but I'm going to explain it in our whiteboard. So let's create another page and let's just explain this thing here. Okay, so let's assume that our that our view has a reference to a delegate it has a pointer to a delegate. Actually, it's opposite direction. It's like this. And this delegate the phone view has a couple of expected things that it's going to receive. It's going to receive how to handle some clicks, and this, because of the magic of how object-oriented programming works, much better. This can be the controller. So the controller, the controller is going to set itself as a delegate. So probably let's do also a set delegate. Or just we can actually make this, the delegate, public. So for example, what is this? Implement. And then let's implement the methods, handle event. And when we view the stage, we can do this dot stage dot where we build root dot set delegate equals this. So we are building a pointer in the phone root. We're essentially building this link, this part, so that the view has a way to interact with the controller, and the view will be just absolutely dumb, and it will just be telling the controller that we should say something like this dot if this dot delegate. That means that if we have a delegate, then this dot delegate dot handle event. At this point, we have removed this reference. Oh, we have to make this different and null. So if we have set up a delegate, then just pass the chain of command down through the delegate. And in here, in our handle event, we can do something like this. And here is where we are going to then split it into a much more interesting thing in the model. Because in reality, public phone model, you can see that the controller is the one that has the reference to the view and the model. The controller is the one that is going to control everything. So then we can do something like, string new message. We can add something here as append to phone string. Let's just make it a Boolean, so that way we know if we are actually storing the values correctly. So we're gonna mark a to do that is just append to current phone value and reformat. So in this case, we can do model.append to phone, and we can just pass this thing, and then view dot, let's say that we're going to then also make the view very dumb about how we draw things in the data. So let's say public void set phone display, and then we're gonna pass a string and phone display, and then we're gonna do this dot phone display dot set text phone. In this case, you can see how it's just essentially passing to our view. It's not really doing absolutely anything, but the model is going to try to keep all the references. These also keeps things lightweight in memory, because sometimes you may not need to have everything loaded, and in some other cases you can. So it can actually like help the runtime to run a little bit faster. Okay. In this case, let's just, to make it a little simpler, in the phone model, we still need to make sure that we are appending the phone. Right now, it's not going to have that much validation, but ideally, this is what we kind of want. So we are holding a string. So let's say this like phone. What's it called when you the end of something? Suffix. So we are going to this dot phone plus equals phone suffix, and then we're going to return true right now. And a couple of things that this thing still needs. First thing, in the phone view, which we had before, we need to call this method build, because that's the one that was essentially creating the text field, setting it all up, setting the effects, adding all the children in the proper way, and drawing the phone dial. So let's call in the controller, right after we created root.build. We had created that function before, so now that should look like it. So if we were to run it like this, we would have run into a problem, because as much as we are running our application, and it's actually drawing, the controller would run out of, would not be in scope and not be visible, and potentially will even die after it builds the view. So what we want to do is that we want to move this guy and then put it as a controller, and then so now we should be able to just run an application that is fully separated from all the previous things. So now we have a broken app because it's trying to dispatch an event that it was not working. So what we gotta figure out is troubleshoot this. So we're getting a Java lang null pointer exception at this Java phone controller.java line 31. In this case, we are probably what we gotta do is add a breakpoint, so that way we can see which one of all these variables is null, if it is the model or the button. I would expect that the model is the one that is null, because we haven't really created anything. So maybe where we're creating the controller and where we're building the application, we should do something like let's actually, since we're doing this controller, we should do public phone controller, and then we can do this dot model equals new phone model, and maybe we should also, and when we do phone model, we should initialize this guy, so that we don't have any null pointers in the phone model, not even in the controller. And honestly, I think that maybe we should change this method so that it's part of the constructor, and then as we are, well, we can just call it that way. It's not gonna be the end of the world. So now let's just run it, and in theory we should be getting a similar behavior as before. and if not, we'll troubleshoot it together, because the entire purpose of this video also is to show how techniques for troubleshooting and figuring out how to learn how to troubleshoot things. So okay, it's not appending anything, which is cool, but maybe we should just debug it, because we do have a breakpoint there. Okay, so we have a phone model which is going to append, so let's just step into, and then yes, we're getting that guy. And we're getting phone. At this point, the phone equals plus equals 1, and what we gotta do is to trigger the drawing of the actual value, because if we look at the model does have a value of 1. So then what we're not doing, and it's clear here, is that we're not really displaying the current value. So let's just figure out how we had the set phone display. So we're gonna then call and say this dot view dot set phone. Where's my view? Oh, phone view. Actually, what we should keep the pointer to is to this guy. And we're changing, instead of keeping the stage, it didn't make sense. So we're phone view, phone model, and phone controller. Everything is more or less like that. And then set phone display, and then we do model.get phone. Let's just destroy this thing that we had before. Where is the window? And we have a full working app, just like we did before, but now it is split into different controllers. Model view controller, where we have, even though that it seems more like spaghetti, we have a clear separation of duties and who does what. One thing that we can do, Boolean is valid, and we can pass a string to validate it. Phone, and return, we can do phone dot matches, and then we can pass a regular expression where we can check if it has either, and we can put this in a block, either digits or dashes, and in one or many. That's the only thing that we want to check. So we can do if, or Boolean is valid equals Boolean valid equals this dot is valid, and we can pass a string potential string equals this dot phone plus phone suffix. And if we do that, then we can pass potential string, and if valid, then we can set the phone string as r equals potential string and return valid. At this point, this code is going to validate that our regex here. And one way to validate it is by using a regex validator. And there's many online resources that you can actually test a regex. This is a good one, regexer. I like it. Where you can just put whatever thing that you can do. So 310 2 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5. And actually that's more or less like a usual string. So we can do something where we're going to validate against a digit or a dash, and we can do many of those. But maybe what we should do is just like that. So if we have a number, a letter, it's not going to match it. It's not going to match it. So let's just put. Now in this case, in this particular case, is going to be less risky to just. Okay, so now let's run it and see if it's doing anything. And it's not. So one thing that to check is then to see probably if the string that we're receiving is coming correctly. And also I think that maybe for simplicity purposes, let's just go for the just a digit. This in regexes means, well, the /d means that it's just a digit. Okay, so why don't we just print, and let's print just a string where we are surrounding it by this this guy's here. And we are I can notice here that there's some extra spaces that the entire passing of the string actually added. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to trim both strings, and now if I terminate it and rerun it, it's only going to validate if I get a number. So now you can see now that it's actually adding it here. But then what if I want to limit it to only 7 characters, because that's more or less what a phone number has. I remove this star, which means 0 or more, and I can do 0 between 0 and 7, and that is the nomenclature for a regex to do that. Regexes are actually really powerful, and it's not something that I'm gonna cover a lot in here, but just enough to show the proper way of like validating some data if we're going to be just 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and then as I am trying to pass more numbers, it's not really matching, so it's not even appending it to the phone number. Do phone numbers have 7? No, actually it's 10 digits. It's 10 digits. So anyway, that's basically the idea of using this validators. In the following part of the class, we're going to do this in a different way, so that ideally we're going to be just pushing less code into the IDE, and we're going to be doing a lot less of this and just doing it in a different way.